Okay, we started recording. We are live. It looks like people are filing in. So we're at 29 or more. We're getting above 30 participants. So really good turnout. We had a great turnout for the last session. So thanks everyone for joining. We can go ahead and get started. My name is Kelvin Harris. I'm the Director of Outreach and Engagement for the Cook County Assessor's Office. So welcome to the second series of the Affordable Housing Special Assessment Program sessions that we're having. We'll be doing a number of these. Again, this is our second one. So the first one was on Class 9 properties. Really good turnout. We hope that was useful. The recording for that is available on our website. So I will drop a link, and we've got some people in the background as well that'll be in the chat. So that's on YouTube, and there'll also be some frequently asked questions available as well, which Vince will talk about. And then for future presentations, we'll be talking about next week, next Tuesday, same time, same channel, prospective affordable housing. And then the following will be on low affordability communities. And we can talk a little bit more about that during Q&A. But again, without further ado, though, let me introduce my colleagues. We've got Vincent Waller here. He'll be giving the bulk of the presentation. He's a director of policy. And then Michael Piper is here as well. He's our director of special properties. So bulk of knowledge on valuation. So brought the full brass here today to cover all the questions. And then the logo you see on the screen behind the scenes is Jennifer Sanchez. She's great. She's a director of communications, handles our social media, helps us to produce events like this. So again, today, our focus is on in-service properties, and then we'll be around for Q&A. For Q&A, we're going to ask you guys to put all your questions in the Q&A box. That just helps us organize them, helps us elevate the questions to the top that are frequently asked questions, that are the most prescient questions. And then the chat itself, we're going to leave reserved for people like Jenny to just kind of post important information and supplemental information. So without further ado, like I said, the bulk of the presentation will be from Vince. I'm going to hand it over to him. So take it away, Vince.
Thank you so much, Kelvin. As Kelvin mentioned, my name is Vincent Waller. I'm the Director of Policy here at the Cook County Assessor's Office, and very excited to roll out for you the Affordable Housing Special Assessment Program. This is webinar 2 of a series of webinars. As Kelvin mentioned, last week we had our initial webinar that was geared towards the Class 9 audience. So in other words, if your property is located anywhere in Cook County and is now or was recently in the Class 9 program, there's a bit of a more simplified, streamlined process to apply for this program. We went over that last week, and we encourage anyone who's interested in applying on the basis of Class 9 to review that webinar. This week and today's presentation is on in-service affordable properties. In other words, if your property currently offers affordable housing and you've made substantial improvements to the property since 2015, you may currently already be eligible for the program, but what steps you have to take to get into that, we're going to go over that in a minute. A week from today, we're going to have what's very similar. There's a lot of overlap between these webinars. Next week's will be very similar to this week's, but they're geared at 2 different audiences. So perhaps you've done the construction, but you haven't put the property in service. Or you just have a plan to offer affordable housing, but you haven't broken ground yet. Next week's presentation will be for you. And we can talk to you about how to start from scratch and how you apply for the program from your perspective, affordable housing. Last but not least, on March 8th, we're going to be going over low affordability communities. There are multiple different aspects of this program, and that's what makes it so exciting for us and for the public, that there's different ways to apply. One of the ways to apply is for those who are looking to construct housing in areas that maybe historically haven't had enough affordable housing. Well, there are special incentives to construct affordable housing in those low affordability communities. If you're interested in offering affordable housing in this part of the county, this webinar will be for you. Keep in mind that this is new for all of us. It's some more than others. And these webinars are a way for us to gauge from the public what the questions and concerns are. So we're, as we go through this program, we're interested in your comments, questions, concerns, both substantive and non-substantive. If I'm going too fast, if I'm not talking loud enough, please let Kelvin know. Kelvin is moderating the conversation. And I appreciate the comms team for facilitating this discussion. Any substantive questions you have, we will do our best to answer them at the end. As Kelvin mentioned, there is a frequently asked questions document in progress, and we hope to have that up on the website very soon. But your questions are what tends to help us understand and inform what the frequently asked questions are. This program is being recorded for training purposes and may be used in conjunction with future communications.
Yeah, and Vince, allow me to just kind of cut
Please.
in real quick. I already see some questions that are coming in through the chat. Please put them in the Q&A box. It's kind of weird on Zoom if you never use it. There's two things. There's a chat at the bottom, and then there's Q&A. Please put those questions in the Q&A. We're going to have someone either behind the scenes answering them there, or Vince will answer them, or Michael will answer them later live. So please use the Q&A. Thanks, Vince.
Thank you, Kelvin. So we have a simple 2-point agenda for today. We're going to go over what this program is and how to apply as a new applicant that has affordable properties already in service. So what is this program? Well, the program was created by state statute last year, and it incentivizes the creation, rehabilitation, and maintenance of affordable housing units in Cook County. Property owners who apply timely can receive yearly reductions in assessed value beginning with the 2022 assessment year, and with respect to the bills you would get in 2023. It's similar to the Class 9 incentive program, but this program is more robust. It provides improved benefits for housing providers as well as low-income households by providing more expansive property tax benefits, more ways to qualify, and by encouraging the development of affordable housing in low affordability communities. If you were a participant in the Class 9 program, you still have to prove the same elements of the application as non-participants. The difference is that you don't have to resubmit a lot of information that you would have already submitted to us before. Everybody else applies as a new applicant, whether prospective or whether you already have proper affordable property in service. First step is locate our applications. We're excited about the fact that these are paperless applications. Historically, our office, much like many local government offices, has been very paper heavy, which means we have more paper than we'll ever need. But we're excited that now with this program, it gives us an opportunity to rethink the application process. So the applications are to be found online at the Affordable Housing Program page. How do you find that? Well, you can see the screenshot here. You go to the upper right-hand drop-down where it says All Forms and Tools. There's a link for affordable housing that we've highlighted here. We also have the direct link, cookcountyassessor.com/affordable-housing, and that gets you to the page. Once you're on the page, scroll down, and you'll see these two blue boxes. You notice there's a part 1 to the application and a part 2 to the application. There's various reasons why this application is broken into 2 parts. A lot of the way that we've done things has been guided by what has worked through the many years of the Class 9 process, which also has a part 1 and part 2. Part of the idea is part 1, you're telling us what your plan is. You're telling us this is what I intend to do. Part 2, you're telling us this is okay. Now this is what I've done. And in many ways, part 1 operates as a letter of intent. Some prospective housing providers may find that it helps with the financing process, if necessary, to show that the process has been engaged. So you're going to click first that blue box, eligibility application part 1. And again, that's regardless of your status as an applicant. All applicants, whether Class 9 or not, or prospective or in service, have to start with part 1 of the application. Click that blue box. You're going to see this pop up. It says Power Form Signer Information. You're going to enter your name and your address. When you enter your name and address, you're going to get an email to the email that you provided to confirm that you are who you say you are. It's going to give you an access code. Save that access code email. It will allow you to keep a record of the status of your application. In other words, you can re-access a partially or fully completed application. If any of you have ever filled out a document online and it's an Adobe document, and then sometimes you navigate away and you come back and then you lose all your progress, it can be very frustrating. One of the many pluses of having this DocuSign-based application is that the DocuSign software lets you save a application in process. Or if you fully completed your application and you'd like to just see a record of what you've completed, you can go back to that same email, click that return to session button, that yellow button, and it will take you back to your application. So the first thing you're going to see on part one of the application is this basis for application section here. And if you are our intended audience, you're going to be clicking that third box, new applicant, as this presentation is geared towards folks that would have already had affordable housing and service, but are not in the Class 9 program, or were not in the Class 9 program, or not applying on the basis of Class 9. So everybody else is a new applicant. And then once you click new applicant, you're going to have a pop-up with 3 drop-down options. You're going to select either whether you have a building-based subsidy, a tenant-based subsidy, or no subsidy. So for example, if you are a LIHTC property, it would be a building-based subsidy. If you have Section 8 or housing choice voucher tenants, you have a tenant-based subsidy. If you have neither, or you have nothing like that, you are what we call naturally occurring affordable housing, you would click no subsidy. Moving right along. Once you fill out that first section, letting us know what your basis for application is, you're going to move down to the basic information section. Some of the questions are pretty straightforward. As part of the same legislation that created this program, there is a mechanism to allow you to certify yourself as a LIHTC property. So if you are receiving that low income housing tax credit through the federal government and you're engaged with their program, we do encourage you to certify yourself as LIHTC. If you've done that, you filled out the form, you're just going to mark yes. You're then asked, what is your control number? Do not worry about that box right now. That's optional. If you have it, fill it out. If you don't worry about it. Next, you're going to put your project name. Project name is not like, not necessarily like an LLC name. It doesn't have to be a registered DBA. It's what you identify your project as. Then you're going to list your PIN number. If you have many PIN numbers, please fill it out on an attachment. You can take an Excel spreadsheet and then click that paperclip icon to upload your list of PIN numbers. We understand that some properties encompass multiple PINs, some projects encompass multiple PINs. Next, if your project is an IDA project, then you would have an IDA project identification number. You know, IDA is one of the categories of rental subsidy programs that's offered in the state of Illinois. If your project is registered with the City of Chicago Housing Authority, with HUD, you would have a City of Chicago HUD ID, tax credit ID, and building identification number, which we would need you to list. If you don't, then you can leave it blank or put not applicable. We have a question here. Does the project have a Class 9 control number? Question 8. Again, if you are not applying on the basis of Class 9 status, then you would just hit the drop down and put no. Next, you're going to select what tier of reduction you are seeking as part of this program. The first 2 options are at least 15 to 34% affordable units. So essentially, you're committing that you're going to provide between 15%, at least 15%, but no, but less than 35% of your units have affordable rents, which we'll talk about what that means. If at least 35%, if you're committing that at least 35% of your units will be affordable, then that's the box you're going to check. And again, we're going to go over in the next few slides what the relevance of the different tiers are. For our audience today, again, if you have a building in service, you would not have low affordability community projects as an option to you, since it would be for new construction or a new rehabilitation, but not already in service. And we'll go over that in more detail in the low affordability community project webinar coming up in 2 weeks. So we talk about tiers of affordability. That's really a term that we've made through rulemaking. We have a statute, we interpret the statute produces these different tiers, but it doesn't really have a good handy shorthand. So we've created these shorthands so you know what we're talking about. When we say 15% tier, we mean at least 15% and less than 35% of the dwelling units are maintained as affordable. When we say 35% tier, we mean at least 35% of dwelling units are maintained as affordable units. We have a bit of a mouthful for the low affordability community tier. It is low affordability communities, which means 20% or greater of the dwelling units are maintained as affordable units in a low affordability community. So what do we say when we mean, what do we mean when we say affordable unit? We mean a unit that satisfies the relevant share of affordability based on maximum rents and maximum income limits. And maximum rent means the maximum regular rent for 60% of AMI. What is AMI? It's the area median income for the geographic area in which the multifamily building is located for multifamily programs as determined by US HUD and published annual by the Illinois Housing Development Authority. Next, when we talk about what are the allowable rents, well, these numbers are subject to change. I mean, they're subject to inflation and they're based on the most recent IDA determinations available. So right now, if you go to the IDA website, ida.org, there is a page, rental housing Maine, and a sub page, property managers. And on there, they have their latest numbers. As those numbers change, our numbers change. But right now, if you have a 1-bedroom unit, what their threshold is $1,049 would be the threshold of where it's still affordable. It's an affordable unit. And again, these are based on the size of the unit as well as, well, they're based on the size of the unit. And then we talk about maximum income limits, because recall the point of this program is not to just give affordable housing to anyone. It's to give affordable housing to distressed households or households that are below a certain income threshold. So what are those income thresholds? Again, these are set by IDA. You can find these numbers on the IDA webpage. They are periodically, annually updated, and as they are updated, our documentation is updated accordingly. But the maximum income limit means the maximum regular income limits for 60% of AMI for the geographic area in which the multifamily building is located. And it's determined by US HUD. So when we talk about the different tiers, what's the relevance of the different tiers? Well, let's take them one by one. You have the 15% tier, which if you should choose that you're going to provide at least 15% of your units as affordable, you're going to, in exchange, get a very nice tax benefit, which is a 25% reduction in AV. So it's a yearly reduction in your assessed value of 25% based on post-construction increased value. So maybe if your property was worth, $50K before rehabilitation, $100K after rehabilitation, we'd be assessing you as if you were a $75K property. And this tier is available countywide, along with a 35% tier. There's, unlike the low affordable community, there is no geographic requirement as long as it's within Cook County. The qualifying activity is you have to have completed new construction rehabilitation on or after 2015. So again, when we say that the elements of the application are same, whether you're class 9 or not, that's what we mean. The class 9 would have already done that qualifying activity. A non-class 9 may or may not have done that qualifying activity, but it's a requirement to get into compliance and be eligible for the 15% tier. The investment threshold is $8 per square foot and improvement of 2 primary building systems. When we say $8 per square foot, that means per square foot of all the habitable square footage in the building. So it's not just if you decided to put a new bathroom in, we're not saying did you spend $8 per square foot on the bathroom itself. We're saying how much did you spend as a ratio of per square foot over the whole habitable space. These numbers are periodically adjusted for inflation, by the way. So it's $8 per square foot as of right now. Next year, it would be a slightly higher threshold. What's the term? So if you get into the program, you're in the program. It's a 10-year term with up to 2 new renewals. So you could have up to 30 years in the program. Now, let's say that you were in class 9 for 15 years, and that means you would have 15 years remaining in this program, right? You might have done 10 years of class 9, you might have done your renewal, you might be in year 5, you might opt into this program, you'd have 15 years left. Minimum building size, 7 units, and that's the same with all the tiers. This program in its entirety, in order to be eligible for it, you need 7 units at minimum. So what's the difference between that and the 35% tier? The tax benefit is different. It's obviously, if you're providing more affordable units, you should get a greater tax benefit. So you're going to get 35% of your assessed value reduced based on your post-construction increased value. And obviously, because this webinar is for properties that are currently in service, we assume that you've already completed your renovations and have leased up your property. So when we talk about the qualifying activity, this is something that you would have already done. And you have to make the determination whether your activity was actually qualifying, right? Was your investment threshold met or not? So here the investment threshold is also greater, right? You're getting a greater burden. But you're going to get a greater benefit. So whereas the investment threshold for the 15% here was $8 per square foot, here it's $12.50 per square foot. And look, if I just flip back and forth, you can see that the other stuff stays the same. So basically, the tax benefit and the investment threshold are what's different with 35% tier. Low affordability communities, again, we're going to go through this in more detail in a future webinar, but a quick snapshot of the difference with this tier. The tax benefit is a mouthful to explain. It's depending on what year you're in, most of the benefit is front loaded. So in year 1, 2 through 3 of the program, you're getting a 100% reduction in the difference between the value of your property 1 year before the affordable units were occupied and the post-construction assessed value. And then that reduction goes down over time to eventually land at 20% between years 13 and 30. Again, it's pretty complicated, something we have to unpack in a future webinar. Other things are similar or should be familiar. You still have to have a qualifying activity of new construction or rehabilitation, but it has to be in a low affordability community, which we'll talk about at another time. The investment threshold is greater. I mean, you are in many ways, you're getting a greater benefit with this program. So you have greater burdens. It's $60 per square foot, an improvement of 5 primary building systems. And we'll talk about what primary building systems, what we mean by that. It is 1 30-year term, and the minimum building size is still 7 units. You are also required to have a project labor agreement prior to the start of construction. So for our audience here today, the part that you may be very interested in is, did you already complete your required expenditure? A nice feature of the statute is that it doesn't want to punish folks that may have already, it would seem unfair, right? If you went out and you spent the money, you did this rehabilitation, not realizing that the statute would come along and had you done this instead of that, you would have qualified. So if you meet all of the requirements and you've completed your rehabilitation or new construction on or after January 1st, 2015, you can use that as your basis for application here. However, the time under the program is told by the date in which the property is placed in service. For example, if you did your rehabilitation and you rented it up in 2015, now you enter our program, maybe you go get in the 35% tier and you're in 2022 now, you have 3 years remaining on the 10-year term. So something to consider.
Hey Vince,
yes.
Can we use a real example here? Because Benjamin Usha, I hope I'm not butchering your last name, actually very timely asked a similar question. If the construction or rehab was completed in 2015 and the applicant applied in 2022, does the time between 2022 and 2015 count against the applicant, resulting in less than 10 years? So that's exactly what you're explaining now. So their rehab was completed in 2015. Does it matter exactly when in 2015?
It matters when it was ultimately put in service, right? So
Yeah.
you would have had to have completed the rehab or construction on or after January 1st, 2015, and at some point after that, put it in service, and the time count against it. I don't like to say counts against, that sounds bad. I like to say it's told. So you're still, and the answer is yes, it would be told. So if you put it in service in 2015, and you applied and got into the program right now, you would have 3 years remaining on your 10-year term, but you still get 3 years of wonderful property tax benefits, and you're still able to file to renew once you're already in the program. So it may still be worth it for you to apply for the program. So thank you for
the
that
question, Benjamin.
Next, now we're going back to the form, part 1 of the form. You have applicant information, pretty straightforward. But what do we mean by the applicant? The applicant is the owner. So we want the owner's information. The owner is the one getting the benefit here. So we want the owner's name, telephone number, FEIN number. The owner may be a corporation, so you're going to list the corporate name and the corporate FEIN number and the corporate address if that is the case. And the other relevant fields that you can see there. I'm not going to belabor those. Contact information, you might have a contact person, you might have an agent on behalf of the owner that you would want us to contact. Like if we have a question like, hey, it looks like I can't see your attachment, can you re-upload it? Who do you want us to call? If it's not different than the applicant/owner, you can leave this all blank. And you see the note here, if the property is held by, you might have multiple owners, so you might have multiple applicants. Feel free to, we would expect that you take a attachment, fill it out in the attachment, and attach it to the DocuSign form. As you go through the DocuSign form, there's multiple places where you see these attachment links, and they all say optional. Attachments are not always necessarily optional, might be optional for purposes of DocuSign, because we don't want to prevent you from submitting the form. If you have the proper information there, but any attachment link that you click, it's pretty much going to end up in the same place, maybe just in a different order. But feel free to use those attachment links where you don't have enough information, enough space on the form to give us the required information. Next, you're going to give us the property description, and you may ask, well, you just asked for the PIN earlier in this document. Why are you asking for the PIN here? I mean, there are cases where what the pins for the property are, maybe different for the pins that are identified as in the project. So that's why we asked for folks to list the PIN numbers for the part of the property that it will be in the project. Or sometimes pins change. You might file for a division. You're going to see that a lot of this information that we're asking for in part 1 maybe a little bit frustrating. We asked for a lot of that stuff again in part 2, but that's because there's often a gap in time between the filing of part 1 and part 2, and these things can change. But this is all required section. And again, if you hover for DocuSign purposes, like if you hover over field 2, it's going to tell you optional. But we do expect to get the PIN, so it's required in that sense. But for DocuSign, we don't know. DocuSign doesn't know. You may have one PIN, right? So field 1 is the only one that you're going to need to fill in, so it has to say optional. But I'm hoping that through this webinar we can unpack those potential ambiguities. Basis for special assessments. There's a note that you see here. If the below information within the section has been previously submitted as part of Class 9, for our audience today, I would just say ignore that note because you're not a Class 9 audience. So right here, you're just going to hit the drop down and pick whether the expenditure was a new construction or a rehabilitation. If the basis for special assessment is rehabilitation, then we need you to complete this section giving us a description of the property prior to rehabilitation. What was the gross living area in square feet? What's the number of existing dwelling units? What's the number of occupied units in the building? Does the building have any uses other than residential? If so, explain. If the basis is new construction, you're going to skip to the next section, proposed dates and projected costs. The next section has to be completed whether you are new construction or rehabilitation. You see this question here or this prompt to include Copies of all code violation citations for the building and photographs of the interior and exterior of the building, clearly illustrating the areas to be rehabilitated. These are best practice. If you're not able to upload those or you don't have them, I would say don't worry about it. Post construction or post rehabilitation, it is a requirement that we need to know if there's existing code violation citations. That is required. We want to see the photos of the completed work. That is required. But again, it's a best practice. We encourage you to do it. It may be helpful, especially if your concern is, hey, I'm filing this, I need to know if I'm on target. I don't want to spend all this money without knowing if I do this, we think that we'll be eligible if we go along as we are proposing to do here, which again is the point of part one of the application, is telling us what your plan is. And if you wish, you could reach out to us and request, much like with class 9, an opinion as to whether, if we go through with this plan, are we on track for eligibility? But again, the more information you give us, the better position we would be in to answer that for you. Primary building systems. So if you are in the 15% or 35% tier, as I went over earlier, you're going to need at least 2 primary building systems to be rehabilitated. In the next slide, we're going to go over what is a primary building system. And if it's a low affordability community, it would be 5 primary building systems. So what are primary building systems? They can include electrical, heating, plumbing, roofing, exterior doors and windows, floors, walls, and ceilings. You could read the list. All of this stuff is, if for anyone familiar with the class 9 process, which we're assuming that you're not, this would be familiar, and there's nothing here different except for energy conservation improvements. But what do we mean by, for example, heating? So in a situation where a property needs rehabilitation, you're often going to find that it may need a new HVAC unit. It may need new piping and heat radiating units. It may need new mainline venting and radiator venting. That's type of things that we're talking about is, and that's why you would rehabilitate a property, right? It wouldn't need rehabilitation if everything was in good working order. And when you rehabilitate, you're going to go for a major system. So that's part of the burden that we are imposing here as a matter of just good policy, right? We don't want to give benefits. We don't to folks that are going to run a slumlord-like property. We want nice, habitable property that is just as nice as the not so affordable units in the building. And if you look at the attachment documents to part 2, it's going to give you more of that detail and break down more of this information. And also we will be coming out with more instructional documentation that will help unpack what these mean. But again, floors, walls, and ceilings, finishes must be replaced or covered over with a new material surface. So again, if you replaced a floor, that's a major expenditure. That is a primary building system. Energy conservation improvements, if you're installing solar, if you are replacing Energy Star appliances, things like that would be energy conservation improvements. Additional documentation, we ask for things like copy of loan commitment, a plat of survey, copy of the deed. So do upload that additional documentation. And again, all of this allows us to engage in a preliminary review of eligibility. If there's some red flag, if somebody obviously doesn't pick up on what the requirements are, and they're telling us that they have a plan that looks like it's not going to meet the requirements of the program, you would want to know that as soon as possible. So give us information so we can tell you that we cannot approve your part 1 application for these reasons, so that you would have the opportunity to cure. Next, you're going to finalize and sign the document. And this is the certification section to part 1 of the application, where you are certifying that the project will stay within income and rent limits that qualify for the program pursuant to statute. And you're consenting to authorization of our use of the information you're submitting, so we can verify eligibility. Once you've completed all of that, you may or may not be ready to go straight to part 2. most applicants are, when they're filing part one, again, they're telling us, this is my plan, this is what I intend to do. But then they have to go and do it, right? They may have to secure financing, they have to procure contractors, they have to do the work. That may take time. Because this webinar is for in-service properties, we assume that you've already done this, in which case you can move directly to part two. There may be a situation where you may need to wait a little bit. Maybe you've done the expenditure. Maybe you have 14% of your units in service as affordable, and you need to get that up to 15 or 16. Then you may need to wait before you can file part two. Now, when we go into part two, again, I mentioned that you're going to have a lot of the same questions you had before. I'm not going to go through all of those sections again. Basic information, applicant information, contact person, property description. If none of that information has changed, just put in the information the same way as it was before. Basis for a special assessment, you're going to, again, pick, was it new construction or rehabilitation? I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Then you're going to describe the finished product. And again, these fields on DocuSign are going to tell you that they're optional. And that's because we're trying to make the form modular. So if you were a class 9 applicant, it would be optional for you. And DocuSign, we can't make it required because then DocuSign wouldn't let them submit the form. So it's going to say optional, but it's a requirement. You need to tell us the description of the property. What is the new gross square footage of the, the living space? What's the gross living area? What's the gross area of the building itself? How many dwelling units do we have, etc. Post-construction dates and costs, you're going to let us know what date did the construction commence or rehabilitation, what day was it completed, and how much did you spend, which is important for us all to be on the same page about whether or not you made qualifying expenditures to meet the applicable thresholds. Then we're also going to need the total cost per system component. So again, if you did floors, if you did HVAC, if you did roofing, that's the system or component that you're going to list in that left column. In the middle column, you're going to give us the total costs. And the final column is cost divided by square foot. And again, this is the square foot for all the livable space in the building. Finally, I'm sorry, not finally. Next, you're going to upload required documentation. We are most of the way through this deck, but we've got a bit of stuff to go through. So again, anytime you see that paperclip, that's your handy attachment icon that you can click, and it will take you to your computer to allow you to pick what document you want to upload. And there's a long list of required documentation. These are living documents. And when we were designing the Part 2 application and the list of documents that we required to be uploaded, a lot of what we were doing was taking inspiration from our existing practice with Class 9 and then combining it with the requirements from the statute and this new statute. Upon closer reflection, some of this stuff may seem a little bit duplicative. So that's why we're going to go through right now what we actually are asking you for. So do pay attention to this. We need proof of written notice to the tenants of maximum rent levels. There are sample documents included in Part 2 of the application. You scroll to the bottom, and one of these slides will show you how to navigate to that piece. That will give you a sample letter to tenants, but it's important and it's a requirement of this program that if folks are living in these affordable units, they have a right to know that you are restricted from charging them above a maximum rent level. We also need documentation to verify the tenant's participation in an income-based subsidy program, if any. We went over what those were earlier. We need the deed or evidence of ownership. We also need a written statement that the affordable units are comparable to the market rate units in terms of unit type, number of bedrooms per unit, quality of exterior appearance. I talked about we don't want to give benefits for folks to just be slumlords or to take this benefit and pass on their savings to the higher paying units, right? We want to make sure that we are treating folks equitably. So we want a statement to that effect, an attestation that the units are comparable in terms of energy efficiency, overall quality of construction. We need documentation from the administering agency verifying the owner's participation in a qualifying income-based rental subsidy program. So if you are an IDA property or a LIHTC property, for example, we want to see that documentation to show some proof that you are participating in that program and you are in good standing in that program. We need a written statement identifying the household income for every household occupying an affordable unit. and certifying that the household income does not exceed the maximum income limits allowable for the area in which the property is located. We have a form for that we'll go over shortly. And a statement that the owner has verified and retained documentation of household income for every household occupying an affordable unit. So we're almost done. You have two items left to submit. One is the tenant certification of household income, and the other is the rental information and tenant household income report form. And we ask for all this info to ensure compliance, right? These are statutory requirements. The spirit of the statute is that in order to reap these rewards, you must be constructing or rehabilitating quality, affordable housing and maintaining it, and acting in good faith with your tenants. So the form that I was referring to at the bottom of part 2, you're going to see this link. It says Affordable Housing Supplemental Documents.docx. You click that, it's going to give you various supplemental information. A lot of it is what we just went over. So you'll have that and it'll be helpful and handy for your records. But some of it we actually need you to complete. So you're going to see this document, among others, pop up. Click that this icon that I have crudely red circled here, and that'll allow you to download it to your desktop or your laptop. And you're going to just save the PDF. It's a fillable PDF. And it is the certification of tenant household income. And the idea is this is something that for each unit it has to be completed. It's going to tell us the address of the building, unit number, the term of the lease. We're going to list the names of the folks in the household and their source of income, and we'll go over what income is included and which income is not included. And then this needs to be signed off by the owner and the tenant. This way we know, and we're certifying and we're testing that this is all true, correct, and complete. And this is our way of verifying that the household is staying within income limits. So what is income that must be included in your total household income? This is what it is right here. You have it on this list. This is also again reproduced in these documents at the attachment that I just referred to. Wages, salaries, and tips, net business income, interest and dividends, social security income, etc. For public assistance, it does not. We have an asterisk there. It does not include SNAP. So what is not included in household income? As I just mentioned, assistance from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, but also foster care payments, student loans, lump sums from inheritance, reimbursement for medical expenses, earnings of children under age 18. Once completed, you're going to upload those completed forms via clicking the attachment icon that you're seeing right there. And this is, it may be a bit of a pain that, this is something that you've got to go to each tenant for, but it is something that, again, we need to ensure compliance, and it is actually going to be a continuing requirement that we need folks to be familiar with it. Now we've got the information about the tenant income and the size of the household, and they've signed off that is accurate. But we also have this spreadsheet here, which goes into detailed unit by unit information. We need all units listed, whether affordable or otherwise. You might have multiple pins, in which case we would need to know which pin corresponds to which unit. If there's more than 25 units, the Part 2 application DocuSign, again, as I mentioned, has a lot of benefits, it has some limitations. Really wasn't able to hold on to a huge spreadsheet. So if we know that we have a lot of affordable housing out there that is larger than 25 units, you won't be able to put those all in the spreadsheet in Part 2 of the application. So we need you to go back to the webpage to download the Excel version of that same spreadsheet, and then you would upload it at the same attachment link that I mentioned before. And we also have an example of a completed form. So whether or not you are using our Excel version or just using the version that's embedded into Part 2 of the application, it's helpful to look at our sample spreadsheet so you can kind of see what each column is soliciting. If you're using the Excel form, again, you're going to fill it out, save it, and then upload it right here where you have this required documentation link. And then again, you're going to finalize and sign the document. I'm going to go over that spreadsheet, and after I'm through with this deck, which I'm almost through with it, because I would have to unshare and then reshare my screen. I don't want to interrupt the presentation at this point. So again, same certification sections before. You're certifying to the accuracy of what you have uploaded, and you're certifying that you're going to stay within income limits, and that we can use this information to authorize you're authorizing us to use this information to verify eligibility. Now, you've submitted part 1 and part 2. What happens next? Next, we have a lot of applications, a lot of processing that we need to do on our end. So we appreciate your patience as we review the application and documents that have been sent to us to verify your eligibility. When this process is complete, you're going to receive communication from us. It would be an email. It's going to say either you are accepted into the program or you are not accepted into the program. If we reject your application, you're going to receive notice of the deficiencies upon which the denial was based. Maybe we were missing a spreadsheet, or we were missing a deed or something, and we would tell you that we had to reject it because we are missing this. You will have 30 days to cure the issue, to supplement with to the extent that you were able to cure the deficiency. You will have time to do so, and at which point we would acknowledge that it's been cured and you would be accepted into the program. Once in the program, I mentioned that some of the stuff you would have to get used to because there are continuing requirements. We need to know that from year to year, you're receiving this benefit yearly. Are you maintaining the requirements to be compliant with the program? So we will be putting together an annual renewal form, and that will be released before the end of this year. It's likely that although the statute lets us check this stuff periodically, and just going off of our history with Class 9, we always did that annually. So it's likely that we're going to do this annually as well. And essentially, the annual submittal requirements would be something like, again, just the 2 documents that we went over, the spreadsheet of the rental information form and the certifications of tenant income. So there are renewals and term limits. Owners can apply for this program or renew through December 31st, 2027. It's a 10-year program with the option to renew prior to the expiration of each term. There's a limit of 3 10-year terms. And if you were in Class 9, the time in Class 9 counts against terms, or if you've already done your rehabilitation, the time that your property's been in service would count against your terms. Now, we've mentioned a March 31st deadline for those that want to get the benefit as soon as possible, and to have that show up on the 2023 tax bill. We hesitate to call it a deadline, but we want to make sure that people understand our predicament. Because the program provides a reduction from AV, we need to apply it before we certify townships to the board of review. We certify townships on a rolling basis throughout the year, and we are still wrapping up the 2021 assessments and have not yet set the township schedule for 2022. But if we get an application by the end of March, a completed application, we're confident we can complete review before the townships start closing. If we get an application after the end of March, we will review it as speedily as we can. And if we have not closed that township, we would apply the reduction before we certify the results to the board. If we have already certified that property's township, the reduction can still be applied, but the board would have to do it. And we can do what we can, including making an assessor's recommendation to the board. But once we certify the township, we can't change the AV to apply the reduction ourselves. Long story short, the sooner we get the applications, the better, and we'll do our best to get them processed and applied. We are at the end of the presentation essentially here, and we're going to go into a Q&A. But I want to mention last week we had several questions about income reporting, and there may have been some confusion about that. So we want to clarify how this works. The application requires reporting about 2 different kinds of income: rental income to property owners and household income for tenants in affordable units. In the parts of the application that ask about rental income, including that spreadsheet that we're going to go over, we need you to report the rents from all units in the program and whether these are market units or affordable units. That helps us to value more accurately. On those parts of the application that ask about tenant income, we only need to verify that tenants in affordable units meet the maximum income standard. We do not need tenant income in units that are not being counted towards the affordability requirements. We need to know tenant income only to verify that the program is working, that it is encouraging the provision of affordable housing for low-income households. The questions last week asked about income reporting, but didn't specify exactly whether this was income to the property owner or to the tenant. We apologize for any confusion that may have resulted. And to summarize, we need rental income to the property owners. We do not need tenant income in units that do not count as affordable. There was also a question about mixed-use property and whether the percentage reduction for affordable housing applies to the mixed-use portion. And I promised that we would answer that next time. This is next time, and the answer is yes. The percentage reduction for affordable housing will indeed apply to the entire value of the mixed-use multifamily residential property. At this point, I am going to stop sharing and ask Kelvin if he can share the
Certainly.
spreadsheet screen.
Okay. Let me get that spreadsheet up for you. Yeah, you need to close out your screen. I'm going to stop you from sharing, and then here you go. Can you see that?
Thank you. Yes. So this is the spreadsheet, and this is actually the sample version that's on the website that will let you know, like, if you are not sure what a column looks like or how to fill it out. You see that unit there, we're just asking for, the unit identifier. So it might be unit 1A, 2A, 3B. Months vacant during prior 12 months. How many months was that unit vacant, if at all, during the prior 12 months? What we like about this spreadsheet is it's a smart spreadsheet. So if you can't go into months vacant and type in yes, it will force you to put in a number. And this helps us streamline our data. If you scroll to the right, Kelvin, you can see the full extent of the columns here. What's the square footage? When did the lease start? When did the lease end? Base rent it means contract rent. Free rent, was there some rent forgiveness that occurred? List that. Is there any additional revenue? Is the unit commercial? How many people in the household? And then household income, which, as we just clarified, this would be for the affordable units only. We're not expecting you to inquire of the income of your non-affordable units. So if we can stop sharing, Kelvin, and turn it over to the Q&A for any questions that we may have outstanding.
Well, hey, first of all, thanks a lot, Vince. That was an extremely thorough presentation. I think a lot more content than last week. So we're going deeper and deeper in. Shout out to Mike Piper for answering the bulk of the questions in the chat.
Yeah.
He answered about 26 questions. So
I tried to get. Yeah, I do want to say that I appreciate the questions, very good questions. There are a few that I haven't answered. And I thought maybe if you have time, we can go through some of those, because I think between the three of us, we may provide a more accurate and up-to-date answer.
Yep, absolutely. So we can grab the handful that are left. I'm just going to kind of go through the list, Michael. But if there are any that you think are just particularly pressing into this conversation, feel free to jump in, or any of the best ofs. But
so what I felt like I may not have mentioned the affordable housing email inbox. Did we provide that email address to everybody?
I don't think so. Jenny, can you drop
it's in the chat.
Oh,
great.
Jenny's dropped that in. There we go. She's ahead of you.
Right. So to the extent that we're not able to answer everything at this moment, that's another resource.
Great. Can you drop that in again, Jenny? Just drop that into the chat maybe once more. So if we can't cover everything today, but again, Michael got to a bunch of those questions. It would have been impossible to answer all of them. So thanks for all this engagement. It's great to see all this coming in fast and furious. So, and this is a new program for us. So, we're learning. And so your feedback and your questions help us to continue to craft this program and make it better. So, all right, why not go in? James Weglars says, would LIHTC and project-based section 8 go under building subsidy? So maybe that's just a question about the application, like where
yeah, and I don't recall where on the application that reappears. If we can clarify that.
Yeah. And the question may be, because I'm seeing some of the questions, there's building subsidy as a specific qualification. And would LIHTC and project-based, I'm assuming that's and I apologize, James, if this is not what you're asking. Is LIHTC and project-based section 8, would that be included under building subsidy?
Okay, so it sounds like we'll get back to James on that one. James, if there's a way for you to shoot us your email, there's a way to contact us directly just in Zoom. You can send it to panelists, host and panelists, but if you can shoot us your email, we can get back to you directly on that, or you can email us at that email that Jenny just dropped into the chat. Okay, let's keep going. Patrick, if we had an existing Section 8 contract for those units, but was renovated with a 221F loan and long-term Section 8 contract renewal. Not sure if this is a part of a previous question.
Would that qualify?
I think so. It's if I think it's a kind of a two-parter. You got another question from Patrick, says if tenants are part of Section 8 and Section 236 program, can the annual recertification from HUD work as the tenant income certification?
So the statute requires that there's certain information that we take in and we can, you know, on such forms as the assessor may require. We haven't perfectly delineated every circumstance where we might accept something in a form different than what we put out there. For the purpose of our data consistency, we are, you know, highly encouraging folks to use the forms that we've provided. I don't think that's a line in the sand that we've drawn just yet. I mean, if that document gets us substantially the same information and the tenant is signing off on it and the landlord signing off on it, I think substance should prevail over form in that case. But that's, I don't know that we can answer that definitively right now.
And again, use that email provided for any specific questions that we can't address today or specific to your building. And then we can, you know, maybe reach out to you or give you a call to talk in more detail. Andrea has a question about the filing fee. Is the filing fee $500 for each application? If I applied and I was rejected, is the fee refunded? If I apply for 10 buildings, is that $5,000? How does that fee work?
So the filing fees are the same as with class 9. Right now, there is no paywall on the website. So you can file your application now and we would bill you later. My recollection is that that would be $500 for part 1 and $100 for part 2. And to stay in lockstep with our class 9 filing fees. I believe those are non-refundable. And yes, it would be if you have 10 buildings and that's 10 filing fees. The projects are building based. So if you have 2 buildings and you have one that has the affordable units, we can't give you the benefit on your other building because the other building's not in the program. So for each program that you apply for, there is a filing fee. Again, there's no paywall set up right now, and we are taking in the interest of expediency, we want to make it possible for people to apply as soon as possible. So we're not making the filing fee a hold up in the process at this time.
Yeah. Okay, great. Anonymous question. This process still seems to be evolving with our office. Yes, it is. I mentioned that. Why is there such a rush to get these documents in by the 31st of March? The questioner says, would it be more prudent to be cautious instead of rushing forward and handling these as C of Es? Can you give us a sense of the timeline, just kind of how the program was designed? Some of this is probably, based on the statute, things like that. So
it's not necessarily, yeah, and it's not necessarily a rush. It's a rush if you want to get the benefit as soon as possible. So if you're okay with, slow walking your project or, submitting as you're able to, you're going to get the benefit in due course. But the program kicked off at the start of this year, and it provides benefits and just from our operational reality, and Mike Piper can speak more than I could as far as the beast it is to assess all the millions of parcels in the entire county. And this is one but many subsets of information that has to be taken into account at the right time in order to apply the reduction on time. So it's only a rush if you're trying to get the benefit on your 2023 tax bill.
Yeah, the idea, the program is going to be in place, and I think the question, and there's some validity to this. Well, we will find out some things we weren't aware of as it goes, and hopefully we'll be able to react and improve upon those. But we want to be able to get this information in so that it is applicable when we mail your first notice out.
Yep. We want to get this benefit out to you. So, thanks for your patience. And that's why we're providing these educational opportunities too, to answer questions, to learn from you, and to continue to improve it. So appreciate the question. Maybe the same person, anonymous again, if an applicant successfully applies for the incentive during 2022 and their 10-year term ends, 2032, can you reapply? Have we gotten that far yet to 2032?
So the program envisions that you can, reapply. But, there is this quirk in the statute that the program, your ability to apply is for this time window that ends in 2027. I would assume that as we get closer to 2027, that might be one of those things where the statute would be amended. I think once we see that this program is a success and it's working well and it's creating more affordable housing, I would think that they would want to extend it further.
Yep.
But for now, I mean, we have this window of time in statute to receive applications.
That makes sense. Hopefully it's successful and benefits the community. And yeah, I think having some time to make those kind of adjustments in the meantime is valuable too. So thanks for that question. Colleen, do we have to differentiate between the portion of rent that the tenant pays and the portion paid by a subsidy? So how's the rent itself broken down?
I think there's a space for it to be broken down on the spreadsheet, but as far as like the analysis, if the question is like, what do we consider the affordable rent? It's based on the contract rent. So it's the rent received ultimately by the landlord. It's not, we don't break it down and say, well, you got 500 from Peter and 200 from Paul, but we're only counting the 500. We would count the 700 that is being received as rent.
Okay. I want to get some variety here, so it's not just that anonymous attendee. Let's go to Lawrence. Is the application automatically submitted to the assessor's office once I click finish on DocuSign?
Yes, and it's unfortunate that DocuSign will not send you an automated your application is received. But that's why we emphasize the importance of saving that email that lets you re-access your application, because it would tell you that submitted on such and such date, and there would be something in I want to say in the header that it adds to let you know that it was filed and completed, and the document would be static and it could not be further edited. I want to clarify something I said about renewals through 2027. So I'm looking at the language of the statute here. Owners eligible to apply for the reduced valuation beginning the first assessment year after the effective date of the act through December 31st, 2027. If approved, the reduction will be effective for the current assessment year, which will be reflected in the tax bill issued in the following calendar year. Owners that are approved for the reduced valuation under paragraph 1 of subsection C of the section before December 31st, 2027 shall, at minimum, be eligible for annual renewal of the reduced valuation during the initial 10-year period if annual certification requirements are met for each of the 10 years. So reading the statute now, I don't want to give the wrong impression that you won't be able to renew, because I think that's what the earlier question was. If I apply now, 10 years go by, can I file for renewal in 2032? My read of the statute right now is yes, you would still be able to do that. You just wouldn't be able to receive new applications unless that statute is amended.
Hey, Kelvin, on another question. I just want to follow up on one of Patrick's questions, because what he has here is actually a follow-up question. I think everybody will be interested in this. And it is, I guess, a clearer definition of what we mean by placed in service date, okay? And he says he's struggling with, how we have defined it. Most of the developers work with existing buildings that have undergone renovations or substantial rehabs while occupied, which is a good point. Residents have moved in and continue to move in at various times before, during, and after the rehab work. So how are we defining in-service date, I guess, Vince, is the question.
That's a good question. And that's something, a lot of the stuff we're going off of our previous class 9 practice. And back in class 9, they didn't really call it an in-service date. They called it a start date, but it's not like I don't think there was a specific definition readily available. So that's something that we can dig into more and help to flesh out our FAQs. But I would imagine it's when you can check all the boxes, when your rehab is done. And in many cases, I mean, I'm sure there's cases where it never stops being occupied. There's other cases where you have to remove the residents and you don't have a certificate of occupancy until the work is done, or you don't have a certificate of occupancy that covers all the habitable space. But like when your project is done, and you have the right threshold of you've had enough affordable units to meet the threshold that you're going for, that would be a reasonable read of in-service to me.
That makes sense. And I think that's coincides with something I put it as an answer to a previous general question about that. And I guess the idea is, of course, if you're finished, you got a CO issue, you're going to be moving tenants in there if it's completely brand new. And if not, you already have tenants moved in anyway. So, in use means kind of in use. I think that's a good description of the term that we mean to be, being used for what the legislation is intended to do.
Yeah, I would imagine it's the later of
Yeah.
when everything is complete and you have the minimum threshold met for affordable units that are in service.
Somewhat similar question from Jerry Brown just came in. Hey, Jerry, if some of the affordable units are jointly owned and managed by the CHA, do those units count toward the 15 or 35% threshold? So CHA ownership.
I don't think that would necessarily matter. I think the point is how many of the units are affordable in the building. So I don't think that should be a bar, and I would imagine that those would qualify towards the threshold.
Right. Makes sense. Good question. Question from another one from Anonymous. This information spelled out on our website. Yeah, please look at the chat. The affordable housing website has been dropped in there several times. So take a look at the chat, and it's got that email address in there as well for additional questions, that's more specific questions that you can reach out to us. Let's see, we've answered Patrick's question, and I think the rest of these are from Anonymous. I'm going to try to cluster them all together, and then sort of answer what we can, guys, and then we'll go ahead and close out. And again, that email address is in the chat. So let me try to cluster all your questions, Anonymous. How is project-based Section 8 income on affordable units considered against the rent limits posted? Maybe jot a little note down for yourselves, guys. But you guys can also see this Q&A. The reduction in assessment refers to the building as a whole, not just a portion of units that are affordable. Is that correct? And then, Michael, I see you've already started typing on.
Now, last one is correct. Yeah, the reduction applies to the building as a whole.
Yeah.
Excellent. And I think, I'm not sure if you just grabbed that last question, Michael.
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
You mean the one about the when we're mailing the rest of the towns?
I didn't see it. It disappeared. So I think
Oh, yeah.
you had just answered it.
Yeah, that's a question a lot of folks, not only the folks on this call have, but folks all over Cook County. I just don't have the dates right now. I don't want to give out any bad information. I apologize for that.
Okay. All right. We don't have the dates on mailings yet, but it is early in the year, and please continue to check. We'll also drop in the chat our calendar on our website, so please continue to check the calendar for those mailing dates overall. Guys, I just want to say thank you. We hope this was informative. Vince, I'm sure you need a drink of water or some hot tea. You had a mouthful there today for us, and some great information. So we hope this was useful, and that's why we provide these, guys. I mean, your questions were great. Your questions instruct us, help us get better. You saw Vince with that list of follow-ups in his presentation from the last session that we had. I'm sure you've given us a lot of food for thought for the next one. So it's an iterative process, and it takes all of us working together, and ultimately is to provide more affordable housing options for the residents of Cook County. So we're all in this together, and that's our end game. So we appreciate it. Please tune in for the next session next Tuesday, same time at 11. What's that one again, Vince?
That would be based on prospective affordable housing for folks that maybe haven't done the expenditure yet, or haven't completed it, or completed it but haven't rented it up yet.
Great, great, great. So more great information and content. This has been recorded, so it will also be available shortly on our website and on YouTube. Probably be pushed out on our social media. So thank you again. Thanks, Vince. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Jenny, behind the scenes in the chat. Any last words or anything we missed, guys, before we close out?
No, great job, Kelvin. Great job, Mike.
Yep.
Thank you both. Thank you, everyone, for all the good questions. And if anything was left open-ended, we'll try to close that loop either through the FAQ or further updates in our future webinar offerings.
Sounds great. All right. Well, hey, we'll see everyone next week at the same time. So until
Okay.
then, enjoy your
Thank
day.
you all.
Bye.